happy to provide you with any of those numbers if you need them for your reports or anything.
Thank you. This is part of your extension outreach, is it?
It is. It is. So I was a former inspector for the state of Texas for a number of years and moved here about 3 or so years ago and met up with Dennis Van Engelsdorf, and he asked me to run his extension program. So it's been fantastic. A lot of fun, especially going from regulatory to this. People actually like to see me.
Beekeeping very different from Maryland, or fairly similar?
A little bit different. I mostly dealt with large commercial operations out west, and so our largest beekeeper, I think, is under 5,000 hives or so here. So relatively small scale beekeeping, but there's a very active and very engaged small scale beekeeping community here. So it's a lot of fun because we're right next to the Capitol, so we get a lot of DC beekeepers, and it's a very intimate little area here. So it looks like Sybil Preston, our state apiarist, just signed on. So
no pressure then.
So I am interested in hearing about the new BT product. That one was something I was very happy to see finally got remarketed over here in the United States.
Yeah, we've been asked that so often. What happened to it? Where's it gone? When's it coming back? And so yeah, we're thrilled to have it. It's been a long run here. Funnily enough, it coincided with it drawn from the UK, and so we're getting the same questions here. Why slightly different strain? Why can't we buy it? What's the issue? So all the frustrations of work, well, as you mentioned, regulatory and
yeah, it can be quite cumbersome. I know I was involved with a couple of registrants over the years, and just trying to get each state to federal first off, and then each state to sign on to it it's a headache for you guys.
Yeah, I don't deal in that area too much. So I just complain about it.
So you're not missing anything. It's a lot of headache to get stuff registered these days, but rightfully so. I mean, I think they've learned a few lessons from the past of stuff getting slipped through that shouldn't have. So I think they're examining a little bit closer these days. So now we just need more Varroa products.
Yeah, and you know, that's the double-edged sword, isn't it? Because it's great for us that these products all have to go through such stringent regulatory testing, because we can really hold our hand up. We use our product with the other registered products, and you know that it's going to be safe for you, for the bees, for people that buy hive product. At the same time, when we look at the cost and the time involved in getting anything to market, it is phenomenal. It's really mind-blowing.
Yeah,
such a niche area, really.
It is, and unfortunately, there's, you know, I teach this in a lot of my classes, is the use of unlabeled product is actually detrimental, because first off, it's unregulated, but second off, it is, you guys spend a tremendous amount of money to bring product to market, and so if there's not a market for it, then there's no reason for you guys to do it other than the goodness of your own hearts. So
yeah, but it's we just had a bill, funnily enough, from Mark, where we don't sell a huge amount of product, and the bill from the regulatory authority was for our annual sales in Denmark.
Wow.
So yeah, you know, we're losing money by selling APIGUARD in Denmark. But it's assessed, you know, assuming in cattle or swine or whatever, where you're talking about huge volumes, and then the piddly sum wouldn't touch the size. For little beekeeping, it makes a big difference.
When I was the chief of Texas, we were under the Land Grant University, which is the extension university out there. And so all of the cattle operations, all the extension from that was held through. And I remember we would have our meeting in our one little building with, you know, donuts and coffee as the break. And you'd go to the Cattle Association, the extension education for that, and they would have prime rib dinners for everybody. And I always thought that it's like us little beekeepers, without us, you wouldn't have a lot of food, but they have the steak. Right. So I guess, you know, so it's, we persist though. That's for sure. I think beekeepers are great at doing a lot with very little. So I think we're starting to get our head of guests joining. So for those of you guys just joining, we are getting started. We'll probably usually start about 2 or 3 minutes past 7 just to let people in. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session, but in the meantime, if you'd like to ask questions, you can go ahead and queue them up in the chat. You should be able to find that on the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it, go ahead and extend your screen to full screen and it should show up. There's a little toolbar on the bottom. And we will get started here in just a few minutes. We do greatly appreciate you staying up late to cater to us over here. It's it's hard to get schedules.
The only good thing was Super Bowl week, so I was kind of acclimating myself to your zone from our time. So
yeah, excellent.
We're actually not such a shock.
Good. We're actually having Celia Davis this weekend is going to be giving a talk at our state meeting. So one of your countrymen over there.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did a Zoom test the other night with her. She was, she's like, as soon as I get done with this, I'm going to bed.
Yep. I haven't got my pajamas on underneath. But,
you know, anymore. Close. I don't think people blame people if they do. As long as you're chest up on the on the recorder. Of course, I don't know if it made the rounds over there yet, but they had a legal proceeding on the news the other day that one of the judges or one of the attorneys, I guess somebody had left a filter on of a cat. And so he showed up onto the Zoom as a cat, and he had to attest to the court that he was not indeed a cat before they could figure out to turn it off.
Superb. Absolutely. I thought everyone dealt with that very well.
Yeah. It's made the rounds on the morning shows over here, and people have made fun with it. Helen, yes, I got your questions the other day ahead of time, and so we've included those in the Q&A at the end. So thank you so much, Helen, for those questions. Okay. And if you don't mind, we'll give it just another minute or so. People are coming in pretty good on the participant side.
So.
Unfortunately, due to a few bad apples, we've had to shift to a waiting room, and so in order for people to come in, I have to manually allow them to come in. So it it slows stuff down a little bit. But I think people are finally getting used to Zoom. So,
well, we've done it, haven't we? The thing that you really miss with Zoom is the internet, and especially looking at people and seeing, are you understanding? Are you bored? Do you know all of this already? Are you falling asleep? It's really hard just sitting to a blank wall.
Yeah, it is truly just talking to a wall. I was at the University of Florida years ago, and we did the video conferencing between our extension centers. And it was the precursor to Zoom, obviously, and it was kind of the same thing. It's like no response other than questions at the end, and it was just kind of felt like you were talking to a wall. But it's honestly, I think it's helped a lot with allowing us to get better speakers and more diverse speakers, because we can pull from, like, we have Tom Seeley coming on this weekend from his home, and we're able to get all these great speakers. So. Plus, I don't know if you were on it this past fall, but we had the COLAS meeting on Zoom. And so we were able to, everybody from all over the world was able to jump on it. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we're going to give it just one more minute here, and we'll go ahead and get started. We still have people coming in. So I kind of want to make sure we get the majority of the people in before we start to roll. Let me get my screen set up here. And again, if anybody has any questions, if you could please direct them to the chat. We'll be answering those at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, Robert, I've just commented. That is the great thing about it, that you can see a lot more. I'm spending my days watching incredibly interesting talk. It takes up a lot of time. That's the only issue, because it's hard to say no. But yeah, it's a great benefit.
Yeah, one of the things that we've had recommended, which is we started up a YouTube channel specifically for this, is to allow us to have these, but then record them to have playback for people to review later. So that seems to help a lot too. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and start. We've still got some people coming in, but we can admit them as we're able to. So let me start by sharing my screen here. And if you'll give me just a moment, I need to organize some windows. Okay, so just to make it to where I can be MC of everything, I'm going to leave the PowerPoint in standard view, so we should be able to see at least the logos and everything. But welcome everybody to the, one moment please, let me, sorry for the delay. I need to start the recording, so let me go ahead and do that. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you everybody so much for coming this evening. We are very happy to bring you yet another in a series of webinars on commercial products that are available for beekeeping, both for varroa control, and tonight we'll learn about other nutrition products as well. My name is Mark Dykes. I'm the coordinator for the University of Maryland Bee Squad, and so welcome everybody. Before we start, I just wanted to go over a few of our kind of house rules and what we're doing with this presentation. This presentation is going to be recorded, so if for any reason you're not comfortable being a part of it during the recording session, we ask that you log off now, and this will be available for viewing later. We will post it to our Facebook page, our YouTube page, as well as a link on our website, so you'll have plenty of chances to allow you to view this webinar in the future. We do not directly endorse any of the products that are featured on this webinar as a university. The manufacturers were invited to come on here to discuss their products. This is a way for you to interact directly with the manufacturers, to ask questions, to learn about the different line of products they carry. And so we're very happy to bring you that, but we are not directly endorsing any of the products. Any of the recommendations that are made by the MDB squad are based on current research findings and are not influenced by the manufacturers. And then finally, the UMDB squad was not compensated in any financial way from the manufacturers. We're doing this sheerly as an informational source for you guys, the beekeepers. And so we are very happy to do that, but we just wanted to make that clear on the front side. We do have one more upcoming webinar in this series for not apiary products. There are the MitoWay Quick Step producers along with a couple other products. You can find information about that at our UMDB Squad webpage, as well as on Facebook. And finally, if you guys are interested, we are always accepting donations. We want to do as many of these free webinars as possible. And of course, they do take money to create and distribute and do all the legwork. So if you are enjoying this, Anything you can spare is greatly appreciated. All the monies that we collect from donations go directly into our research. So it is directly supporting all of our research and extension programs. I do want to make you aware of the Honeybee Health Coalition, and a lot of the products that you hear today, especially the Varroa products, are all listed in the Honeybee Health Coalition guide to, tools for Varroa management, as well as Varroa decision-making tool. They are available to allow you as a beekeeper to make well-informed decisions. As always, with any of these products online, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me at bsquad@umd.edu or go to our website. And we have a chat function there or an email function there that you can directly contact us. And so we really look forward to helping you guys out with that. Without any further ado, I want to introduce Seb Owens. He is the director for Vita Bee Health. Vita Bee Health has, Vita Europe, which is the parent company, has a number of different enterprises. Vita Bee Health is the one that works with our industry. He has 13 years experience with the company, background in biological science, and is a part-time beekeeper. And I really liked it in your write-up, you put quotes around that, because we know part-time doesn't always mean part-time. Sometimes it actually means full-time. And so what we're gonna do now is transition over to Seb, who will provide you with some great information about the products for Vita Bee Health. And Seb, if you would like to start sharing your screen, you're welcome to. At the end of the presentation, we will be having a short Q&A session, and this will allow beekeepers to have questions asked or answered for them. You can put questions in the chat box. We do have a few pre-submitted questions, and so I would encourage you guys to wait till the end of the pre-submitted questions, and hopefully that your questions will be answered. So without any further ado, Seb, you take it away.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thanks really to everybody who's joined us this evening. It's great to be speaking with you. As I was saying earlier, it's a little bit like speaking to a blank wall. So please do get involved in the chat. I'd love to hear kind of whether you're following, if you've got any questions as we go along, and I'll try to address them as we go. I like this to be as interactive as we can possibly do from a world. I'm going to switch my video off shortly. I hope you don't mind. I've got issues here today, and I think it's probably going to be better to hear me. So I'll do that. I also wanted to apologize. I've kind of come to false pretenses slightly, Mark, to talk about our products, and I will do that. Well, I could talk about our products all day. I could be here for hours. A lot of it really down to please read the label. I thought that I could perhaps add more value by talking about what I think is a really important subject, and one which there's a huge amount of research around, but a lot of beekeepers, I think, without wishing to insult anyone, are doing perhaps the wrong thing in terms of nutrition for their bees. So I'm going to talk a little bit about its importance, and then I'll cover off briefly all of our products, because I don't want this to be an amazing session. I'd like to try to give you some value, and of course in the Q&As, if you have any specific questions on our products, I'm very happy to answer any of them if I can. So a little bit of background then. We're Vita Bee Health. Yeah, we were formed back in '97, so we're coming up for 24 years now, dedicated to honeybee health. 1997 we were known as Vita. All that's changed is the name. We wanted to make clear our focus on honeybee health. We do have a very small startup division called Vita Animal Health, which is doing companion animal nutraceutical in the UK. It's a small but growing part of the business, but essentially our focus is on honeybee health. And I think that's important because in an industry where it can be difficult whether what you spend on your products is healthy, whether it's ultimately going to find its way to a parent company that might be a big industrial firm making most of it only from making agrochemicals and the like, which dramatic or of questionable benefit to pollinators. We're really proud to be an owner-run company, no interest in crop pesticides or crop breeding that could be able to honeybees. So we are based in the UK. We're about miles southwest of London in the UK. And we've got a small apiary that we run. We're a company of beekeepers. There's 6 of us company, and we have a small apiary that's very office. So it's in the town of Basingstoke, and so it's a good location for an apiary because it's on an allotment site, which is where people that don't have large enough gardens can grow their vegetables. So there's a lot of variety of flora there, and then there's all the gardens of the town, and then surrounded by agricultural fields. So a lot of canola and in the area. Just to give you a quick idea of what beekeeping looks like here in the UK, this is a sort of smallish, medium-sized apiary in English terms. All beekeepers here will run just 1 or 2 colonies. We've got about 10. They're mostly on single brood box Langstroths, although we do have also some British national type hives, which are square. And we're running this apiary because and we want to be able to get down and spend time with the bees as much as possible, but also it gives us a great opportunity to speed up our research and development program by running sort of quick and dirty trials on our bees. Our technical guys, Max Watkins and Paolo Mielgo, they spend a lot of time running research in Italy, Greece, and Cyprus. They tell me it's because the climate's doing research. I'm pretty sure it's because the coffee, wine, and the beaches than they are in the UK. But they claim it's the Varroa season and similar. But in the Basingstoke apiary, we can have quick looks at things rather than running more formal trials, which of course we will do as well. And especially what we're looking at is, as I mentioned earlier, what I think is one of the important topics in beekeeping at the moment, which is nutrition and nutritional supplements. It's those 3 letters, which I'm sure you're as bored of as I am, CCD, it's, the cause isn't clear, it hasn't been found, but it's almost certainly multifactorial, with problems like agricultural pesticides, intensive agriculture, Varroa, of course, combining to stress the bees and cause the colony to collapse. There's evidence now that's showing that nutrition is a leading factor in colony collapse disorder. Researchers have found, for example, in papers published in Italy and Brazil recently, that bee bread is contaminated with a cocktail of chemicals. The slide you saw is a pollen analysis, which shows a huge number of chemicals, many of them harmful to bees, and that this results in a decrease in the bee lifespan. So why is nutrition so important? Each honeybee colony, of course, has in general just 1 queen, and she can lay around 2,000 eggs a day. The cell that each egg is laid in is, of course, then occupied for about 3 weeks before a new egg can be laid inside it. So there's a limit to the amount of brood that a colony can produce, and therefore to the number of nurse bees that are required to look after that brood. We all know that for a good honey harvest, you need a strong nectar. So well known that large colonies are the most productive. And this is because as a colony becomes larger, the ratio of adult bees compared with brood is much higher. There's more foragers available, as you can see on the left. The ratio of foragers to brood to nurse bees is higher. So they can then go out and collect nectar for conversion into honey. As you can see there's an exponential relationship between the number of bees and the potential honey production of that colony. It's a large number of bees in one colony will produce more, same number of bees split between smaller colonies. Go into a structured colony, nutritional needs of the bee need to be met. So they need, similar to us, of course, carbohydrates, water, mineral, vitamins, lipids, which are fats, and trace elements like magnesium and many others. They get the carbohydrates from nectar, or 60% of their carbohydrates from nectar, and the other 40% from pollen. And they use these carbohydrates to produce two types of wax and body fat, vitellogenin. Bees can't store sugar directly, so this vitellogenin is deposited in their adipose tissue, especially in the autumn. And this, they need protein to produce the enzymes that catalyze the conversion. Looking at the bee life cycle, larvae need carbohydrate, but what they really need is a lot of protein of royal jelly to support that development from egg to adult bee. For the first 2 weeks of a bee's life, performing those in-hive tasks, like keeping the comb clean, feeding the larvae the comb, they're also working really hard to build up their fat bodies as much as possible with protein, fatty acids, and carbohydrate. And they're at the same time using a lot of protein to produce royal jelly and wax for the brood. And this is a key point, because at that 2 week point, the peritrophic membrane, which is the layer of cells surrounding the gut, starts to degrade, and the bees are no longer able to absorb protein in their diet, and they on their fatty bodies as their only protein source. So that the quality and quantity of the fat body produced in the first 2 weeks of their life dictate the length of a bee's life. What you can see in this slide is a young bee with a nice peritrophic membrane on the left. And then the next two images, in the middle, you can see a bee gut full of pollen. What's interesting here is the amount of the sort of white space needed in the bee gut for the bee to be able to process that pollen. Then on the right-hand side is the gut of a bee, which has been fed with free amino acids. I'm going to talk a bit more about this. But what you notice there is that there's a real concentration in there. There's very little empty space. Hydrolysis, which again I'll come to later, isn't required with free amino acids. So bees need two types of energy, for flight, which they get from sugar, and from metabolism, which comes from their body stores. So if there's only sugar in the bee's diet, but they can't produce wax, royal jelly, and everything else. This metabolism, which I mentioned, one of the major types of that, metabolism is the chemical process of converting one thing into another in a body. One of the major types of metabolism is converting nectar, which is sucrose, and the bees can't directly use it, into fructose, which they can store and use as an energy source. Bees have which convert protein into the enzymes need to do that metabolism. So they need protein. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, they need fructose and glucose, so can't I just feed that to the bees and shortcut this step? Unfortunately not. It has been tried and now known that bees can't directly use glucose and fructose from the diet. It needs to be processed within the body, so protein is still required. So to make energy, bees require protein as well as raw carbohydrate. And I think it's a little bit like fueling your car. Cars essentially run on crude oil, but if you try pumping into the fuel tank, you wouldn't get very far. It needs to be refined, it needs to be processed first. And that's what the bees need to do. And this means that the goal of any nutrition program for a beekeeper is to bees to produce the necessary enzymes to break down glucose and generate energy. This is a really important point. So this protein, which comes naturally from pollen, is needed for growth of muscle and tissue, for production of enzymes, as I've mentioned, and hormones, for the production of new cells who support the immune system of honeybees. This is why nutrition is so important. To make proteins that bees hydrolyze other proteins, they break them down into their component amino acids. So amino acids are like the building blocks, the Lego blocks of proteins, and they can then be formed into the proteins and enzymes and other things that the bees need at the time. If a particular amino acid building block is missing from the diet, the bee can synthesize it from other amino acids that are present in excess, except that there are certain amino acids that bees can't synthesize. Like we call these essential amino acids, and these must be consumed they must be in the diet. Not only that, they must be in the diet at a particular ratio in terms of the content of the overall protein. So, for example, you can see here that isoleucine is needed by the bees at 4% of their total protein intake. If the bee's diet doesn't contain that quantity of essential acid and that ratio, then they're unable to process the rest of that pollen source. So they have a way around this. They can improve the quality by mixing sources in bee bread. But if this mixture still has only, say, half the amount of one of the essential acids, only 2% of isoleucine instead of 4%, then they will only be able to produce or process half of that protein source, and the rest will be expelled. And you can think of this in terms of dog. If you feed your dog a great diet, then they're able to process the whole diet, and there's not too much for you to clear up after them. Poor quality, then they're less able to process it, and you need to find with a shovel. In bees, the equivalent is known as pollen block, and that's where you'll find a small amount of brood surrounded by loads of pollen, which, if you don't know what you're looking for, can be confusing because you think, oh, great, they've got loads of pollen, I don't need to worry about it. But that pollen block is a sign that there's not the right ratio of proteins in pollen and that the bees are struggling. At a colony level, bees are going to be consuming somewhere between 25 and 55 kilograms of pollen per year. And separate this pollen out, we can grade it by the percentage of crude protein it contains. So that crude protein is essentially the amino acids. Graded into low quality with below 20% crude protein in the pollen, up to high quality with more than 25% and excellent quality above 30% crude protein. For every 10 grams of protein the bees are every 10 grams of protein that they need. For every 10 grams of protein that they need, if they're collecting excellent quality pollen, about 30% protein in the pollen, then they need around 50 grams of pollen. On the other hand, if that pollen is low quality, to get that 10 grams of protein, about 70 to 80 grams of pollen. And so you can see that at a colony level, your annual pollen requirement can increase from about 40 kilograms if the pollen is of excellent quality, up to 70 kilograms of low quality pollen. See this as a smaller brood, fewer bees, and reduced honey production because of the effort that's going in to collect that additional pollen. So these two factors, the availability of amino acids and their correct ratio, and the percentage of crude protein, the quality of the pollen, lead to a rule of thumb, is another key point, that bees need around 6 to 8 different sources of pollen at the same time. You can see this when you're making your hive inspections or even just watching the bees coming in and out of the hive by looking for different colors. If you're seeing 6 to 8 different colors of pollen at the same time, then you've probably got a good health. If there's not enough pollen or not enough pollen of a sufficient quality, then nurse bees can't produce enough royal jelly. And what they'll do is they'll evaluate the larval development, and eventually they'll start eating. First of all, they'll produce less royal, they'll start eating larvae, and eventually do this for 2 reasons. The first is that it maintains the population at a sustainable level. They're not allowing the population to, and therefore the demand for protein to increase. But it also helps these nurse bees to thrive because they're consuming an excellent protein source. So I've been talking a lot this evening, and I apologise for anyone who hasn't had the chance to eat yet. So I think that it's there's a good comparison when fall into the trap of feeding their bees with sugar and thinking that's all they need to do. A bit like us having a Coke 3 times a day, every day. We're full. We might feel good for a short time, but it's not doing us any good at all. It's not helping our health, and eventually we'll crash. And it's very similar with feeding bees just sugar. I think it's vital for nutritional programs to include protein, unless you've got 7 or 8 different colors of pollen coming in, and then ignore a lot of what, because the bees are doing it fine by themselves. So with this monoculture, loss of natural borders, pesticide, loss of forage, all the stress we talked about earlier, a lot of colonies can't thrive with the pollen available to them. So how can you help? And this is where I'm now going to switch from what I hope was sort of informative to doing a slight bit of propaganda now, and I'll talk about our product and how we've got 3 nutritional products which we have spent a huge amount of time developing and testing all over the world. And we've put together a annual nutritional protocol which goes through the beekeeping seasons and makes a huge difference to the productivity and the health of your colonies. We've got VitaFeed Power, which is a liquid growth promoter, which can be used in spring. I'm going to run through these fairly quickly. I don't want to bore you, but essentially, when we compared it with we found that roughly 2 extra frames of brood per colony after a month of feeding with this product. One sort of minor side note on this is that there has been some research recently showing that vitamin C is to increase varroa tolerance and reduce infestation levels. Now, VitaFeed Power is, I believe, the feed with additional or added vitamin C. Not by any means claiming that it's part of your varroa control strategy. It certainly should not be. It's possibly going to give the bees a little bit of a boost in that way as well. It's also common that there can be strong nectar flow, but not sufficient pollen at the same time. It leads to a boom and bust as the colony builds up unsustainably quickly. So once that nectar has started flowing, we've got a powdered nutritional product that can be sprinkled onto the brood frames. The importance of it being powder is that it's not going to be found in the supers, so it won't contaminate the honey in any way. It's just a tiny amount you need, just a teaspoonful every 10 days or so, sprinkled on when you take a super off or put a super on, or you're otherwise visiting your colony. And again, this leads to a really significant increase in honey production a lot of the time. Sometimes, as here, in a good year, this is in Argentina, the test I'm showing you here, and it was a great year for honey production there. So the 2 kilogram difference, about 5%. The following year, it was a much worse year for honey production, and the difference was still roughly the same, 2 and a bit kilograms more honey per hive, but that was now nearly a 20% increase. And then finally, we have Vita Protein Patty, which again, used in springtime, gives about 2 extra bees, 2 extra brood, compared with just plain sugar fondant. And it's also great for strengthening winter bees and really boosting the colony to survive through the winter. Now, soy flour has a couple sugars in it, which can be toxic to bees. So we don't use soy flour in any of our nutritional products. Another interesting point, you might be thinking, well, Feed Power resulted in 2 more frames of brood. So does VitaFeed Patty. So what about if I use them together, which we recommend incidentally in the spring? Because VitaFeed Power is full of those free amino acids, and they cause the bee to produce they boost them so quickly that what they also need is some protein rather than just the amino acids. But you might be thinking it would mean 4 more frames of brood, wouldn't it? And that's what we thought. So it doesn't. We couldn't work it out until we realised that we've only one queen who can only lay that fixed number of eggs a day. And what we're doing with these products is pushing the colony on as fast as it physically can. And even putting the 2 products together, it can't go any further. So we put them together, and these figures are from the UK. So ignore the numbers. But what we found was that if you use this protocol over the 3 products together, you get about a 1/3 amount of honey that you produce. And more importantly, as far as I know, you've got healthier colonies that are better able to resist disease and are better prepared for winter. We get better survival. But if you're looking at the bottom line, it's very important to you, then roughly for every $1 you put into our nutritional protocol, you get about $4.50 back in terms of additional honey production that you can sell. And of course, also extra frames of brood, extra frames of bees if you're a pollinator and your colonies are being graded. So that was a really quick run through of nutrition and our nutritional products. As I said, I want to go through this fairly quickly because I don't think you want to just hear me talking all the time. I think it's more interesting if we can get to any specific questions you might have. So what I'm going to do for those of you that may not be familiar with Vita Health is just a brief introduction to our product range. I'll perhaps couple of them again in brief, and then I'd love to hear any questions that you might have. So we're really a varroa control company. That's our main. We were formed from Novartis, which was a merger between Ciba-Geigy and Sandoz, 2 companies that were the sort of pioneers of varroa control, with Apistan, and then a development product called APIGUARD, which a lot of you may well know. We also have the BGM and the BGM Slim, which are funguses, which are they're like scratching posts for bees, and the bees use them to groom, and they do have a sort of in allowing the bees to increase their grooming of varroa mites and removing those mites. But real efficacy the BGM and the BGM has, well, we're working on that to try to sort of prove that. APIGUARD, I need to be careful what I say here. The most important, of course, when using any medicinal product for bees or any other product for bees is to read and follow the label. The instructions on the label are mandated in the US by the EPA, and it's absolutely vital that they're followed. But there's a couple of things the questions that I get about APIGUARD that aren't clearly true and that I just wanted to address with this product. So APIGUARD, first of all, is a thymol-based gel. It's a temperature matrix. So the gel contracts when the weather gets hot and it expands when it cools down. So there's a controlled release of the thymol, of the ingredient. It's available. These are photos from Europe. We're now in a green container in the US because we're a green company and we wanted to remind you guys of that. But it's available in a 3 kilogram bucket. Sorry, I don't know what that is in pounds. Or in the trays, the foil trays, and also in the white sack, or 25 grams. Is it temperature dependent? A lot of people get stuck on this, and I'm going to return back to what I just said, which is please label. We sell APIGUARD in around 45 cities around the world. So I can't tell you exactly what it says on the label in the US. I'm going to talk a little bit more generally. And that is, yes, APIGUARD is dependent. But there's a rule of thumb. Don't get too stuck on exactly what temperature it may and may not be, because of course you can't control what the temperature is going to be. You can't really predict it more than a few days in advance. If your bees are flying and if you're expecting them to continue flying for the next weeks, then the product's going to be effective. In terms of the high temperature, because the gel matrix is going to contract when the temperature rises, the release of thymol is slowed down as the temperature increases. So it's less sensitive to high temperatures. But there is an effect of high temperature on the colony. There is still an increase in thymol release, and the bees don't like it, and they can react. They can beard outside the hive, and in some cases, rarely they can abscond. It's usually very temporary. This can be controlled for, and again, read the label. I don't know if this can be done, but this can be by adjusting the dosage. So instead of using a 50-gram tray, moving to a 25 sachet, and the same with the tub, moving to a lower dosage. And we've done numerous studies in many countries and found that by doing that, you get similar or even better after using the full dose, but with a greatly reduced risk of side effects. The other sort of battle that we face with APIGUARD is persuading people to try it, because all beekeepers know that strips are simple and easy and the best form of treatment. And having to put this gel in a hive is more work. Well, yeah, there's some truth to that. The vital thing with APIGUARD is that there must be a gap so that the bees can get to it. So there needs to be that gap. But talking about the strips, when you're using a strip treatment, it's essential that you put the strips in and 2 to 8 weeks later, usually, take them out. Otherwise, you're going to be building up resistance problems. With APIGUARD, you need to do is apply the first dose and then a number to apply the second dose. It's the number of hive visits because the gel is going to be removed from the colony by the bees. So you don't need to go back and remove that second dose. So it's only 2 visits to the colony. It's no more effort than using a strip treatment. Briefly, how to use it. So this is I think I missed a slide there, perhaps. No. This isn't the tray. It's using the tub. I've got photos there. I apologise for that. With the tray, you just peel back the lid, put it on the brood frames, face up in the middle above the brood, above uster. Make sure there's that space for bees to get to it. Leave it for a couple of weeks, and then replace it with the second tray. If there's any gel left in it, then you can leave it there. And it's very similar then with the smaller sachet. Again, you can squeeze that, leave it there, and then repeat as directed. And the tub, now with the correct photos, we now have a graduated syringe that we supply with the tub. So you're removing the appropriate, which will normally be 50 grams, but maybe less depending on the temperature. Putting it on top of the frames, making sure that there is enough space for the bees to access the gel, leaving it there and then repeating. It's a really simple, quick application. One of the nice things about APIGUARD is that because it's a thymol-based product, its major mode of action, there's a bit of vaporization, but its major mode of action is because they don't like it being there. They get up into it, clean the hive out, and they're leaving a trail through the frames, and so while they're doing that, it's increasing their hygienic behaviour and having an effect overall health and of the colony. And I've seen some questions coming in. I'm going to try to address now. So the dosing card, it's sometimes consumed, sometimes not, depending on the bees. All colonies are different. It doesn't need to be removed. No, it's sometimes they'll propolyze it. Sometimes they'll chew it up and spit it out. It's not going to do any harm, and it can just be thrown away next time you visit. Total time for APIGUARD 4 weeks. No, in general it's 6 to 8 weeks. So and again, follow the label, but also it does vary depending on the temperature. But in a climate, and we have to speak generally, you're going to leave the first dose for 2 weeks. The bees are going to react to that first dose fairly quickly because it's a foreign substance in the colony, and they'll probably remove it fairly quickly. After roughly 2 weeks, apply the second dose, and then leave that for about 4 weeks. So you've got a total treatment period of about 8 weeks. The question about what draws them to the gel, attracted to it. Well, they're not attracted to it. It's a little bit the opposite. They don't like it. It has an odor. The bees want to get rid of it, so they go and they clean it out. They get it in their mouths, over their body. They then take it down from the top of the frames down to the hive and eject it from the hive. When they're leaving a trail of it frames, and in that way it comes into contact and kills the mites. At the same time, it's evaporating, so it's not all removed. A lot of it will evaporate as well, and thymol vapor is heavier than air, so it's sitting down through the colony, and there is some inhalation effect of the thymol vapor as well. The label, there's a question whether we provide it on our website. No, we don't, and that's for the simple that we sell this product in so many countries with so many different labels that we can't have all of those labels on the website. What I will do towards the end is I will put my email in the chat, and I can respond to anyone that would like me to send the label. We'll look at a way that we can make the labels more easily to you. That's something that I'll look into. Describe the efficacy. Yes, in tens or possibly hundreds of trials that we've done in lots of climaticians and all over the world, the average efficacy for APIGUARD is 93% mite kill. And now that will vary. The second question is, after the 4-week treatment window, what's the percentage of mite drop? Yeah, so 93% roughly after the 6 weeks. It will vary slightly depending on the question, and also on the climate, and it will vary depending on the bees as well. It's in that region of 93-95%. It's a very good. And I'll just take one more before I move on, if that's all right. We can always come back to APIGUARD if there's any more. What is the shelf life? It's 3 years from date of manufacture. Can it be extended with specific storage temperature? The shelf is 3 years, and I can't really say any more than that, I'm afraid, because we follow what's written on the label, and therefore you must only use this up to the expiry date written on the label. I wanted to briefly touch on Apistan. Apistan is a product that we at Vita have sold around the world for since Jeremy and Max, who formed the company, were working at Sandoz, and they then took Apistan to Vita to form Vita. We still sell huge amounts of it around the world. It's still extremely effective and well liked. We've just recently started selling it in the US as well. We had historic reasons to do with competition. I can't remember what you call it now, but yeah, to do with competition laws in the US when the product was first sold, and it's something that, you know, with beekeepers, you have 3 beekeepers, 6 on any question, except I've found, and speaking to beekeepers in the US, except when you ask them about Apistan, when everybody agrees it doesn't work. And we have a challenge on our hands, but that's fun. And what I just to highlight is that Apistan, it is still effective. There are, with any treatment, AMITRAS treatments, with pyrethroid treatments, there are issues with resistance. But I think that it's something that perhaps beekeepers in the US, it's become received wisdom rather than something that's actually been tested. We've done tests all over the world, and including tests in the US, and we found that Apistan does work. What's really important, though, and I can't stress this enough, is that it must only be used as part of a integrated payment strategy, product rotation. So with any product, really, I would highly recommend you don't use it year in, year out. But that's particularly important with Apistan. If a pyrethroid, whether that's an agrochemical or Apistan, has been used on your colonies within the last year or 2, then there is quite a that there will be resistance issues. But in the absence of pyrethroids for a couple of years, then the really high chance is that Apistan will be active, and it remains a really simple, easy to use product. So what I'd say is give it a chance. You know, it's a great product. It's used very widely all over the world, and it's simple, it's safe, and you'll probably find that it works. Another question, whether, I think this was relating to APIGUARD, but whether it's effective on phoretic mites. Yes, I think there's only one approved product that's effective on capped cell, on mites that are in caps, and is perhaps there are 2 now, but the formic acid products. Basically every other product is only on the phoretic mites, which is why with both APIGUARD and Apistan, we're recommending them for that 6 to 8 week treatment period, so that you're covering a few emerging brood cycles, and then the mites will be phoretic during the treatment period. So with APIGUARD, try to make sure that the treatment period is 6 weeks, and similarly with Apistan, it must be between 6 and 8 weeks. I've already mentioned the additional products. We've also got our FOULBROOD diagnostic kits for European and American FOULBROOD. So these are test kits, very similar to pregnancy test devices. They're lateral flow devices, which give a very quick and accurate, they're essentially as accurate as a lab test diagnosis of American or European FOULBROOD. They're single-use kits, and what you need to do is take a suspect larvae or 2 or 3 suspect larvae, put them in the provided bottle with buffer solution already in it, everything you provided. Give that a good shake, ball bearings in there as well, they'll break it up. And then after giving it a good shake, use the syringe provided to take a couple of drops, put them onto the test device and leave it for about up to 10 minutes. You'll see the buffer solution will flow across the device. There's a control line which you want to see light up blue or show up in blue to show that the test is working. And then there's a test line which you hope is not going to show up. If it does, it means you have either European or American FOULBROOD. So it's a good thing to have in the book. And if you have any doubt, then it can quickly tell you you've got a problem or not. We've got our swarm attractant wipes, which are incredibly effective. The first time we really knew how effective our researchers in Greece, who was developing the product for us, had one in his in the back pocket of his pants, and obviously there was a slight split in the sachet. It's a wet wipe in a sachet, a split in it, and he ended up with a swarm on his on the back of his pants. We know that they're effective. They're really easy to use. You can either pierce holes in the sachet itself, or open it up, take the wet wipe out. It's an impregnated wipe, and put that in a bait box or an empty brood box or a skep, or however you want to position it, or even hang it from a tree branch. And what you're going to do is make sure that if bees are swarming nearby, it's not going to want to swarm. But if bees are swarming, then they will that way you want them, rather than the top of the nearest. The question, is there a shelf life for the test kits? Yeah, now this is where I to say that I'm not 100% sure. I mean, yes, we print a shelf. Again, it's 3 years from date of manufacture. You guys in the US have a slightly different system to shelf life than we do in Europe, and it always surprises me that there are some products in the US that need to have a shelf printed on them, whereas here in Europe, it's essential for virtually every product. We know that with the kits, if the control line shows, then it's still going to give you a valid result. But yes, there is an expiry date printed on it, and it is 3 years from date of manufacture. So then the question, a product that Mark mentioned earlier, 2 or Sertan. This was a product that was sold in the US many years ago, and for regulatory reasons, I believe, it was removed from the market. This was before my time. We've now just a slightly different strain of bacteria. It's a concentrated bacterial solution. We now have a slightly different strain, which is it has a better regulatory package. So we've got better toxicology data and safety data for strain, which has allowed us to return it to the market. Wax moth protection. So you dilute the solution. It's a 5% dilution, I think, and spray that on the frames before you're putting them in storage, back and front. Let the frames dry, put them in, and the wax moth larvae will consume it when they emerge, and before they can do any, they die. So it's neat, very safe. It's approved for organic operations here in Europe, and it's, you could drink it. It's that safe. It would taste disgusting, but it's safe enough to drink. Leave any residues, and gives you great protection, basically 100% protection against wax moth damage. So that's the product range. What I'm going to do is just type my email into the chat box. If anyone does have questions that you don't get the opportunity to ask here, or that I don't get the opportunity to answer, then please do get in touch with me. I'm delighted to help wherever I possibly can. Thank you for your question. B402 in Canada, yes, we're working on it. The regulators in Canada are acting, so it's it's a long, very expensive process. We have to look at it very carefully, but it is something we want to do. We certainly want B402 and API available in Canada if we possibly can. What we do sell now in Canada is fumagillin B, which sadly was removed from the market a couple of years ago when Medavet closed down. Through our connections, we were to get that back in Canada. Again, we'd love to get that into other countries around the world, but it's that regulatory issue that is the bane of my life, and I'm very glad I don't deal with directly. Question: why was B401 discontinued? I don't know. My best understanding is that it's a really old product, more than 30 years old, and the data that was required at the time it was first sold, in fact, it's probably around 40 years old now. That then was enough to allow it to be sold, but regulatory requirements and enforcement has grown over these years, and for such an old strain of bacteria, there weren't the studies available, so there was no safety issue. There was no incident that caused the product to be discontinued. It was simply that the file of these that we had for the product was no longer meeting the required standards, and so we had to discontinue that product. We've now, working with our partner Valent, we've developed this strain, which is just as kind to bees, just as effective against wax moth, but has a better profile in terms of the data that's available for it. So once again, thank you very much for being here. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to talk with you. I hope you found it useful, and I'm really happy to stay on and answer any questions that you might have. I'll see if I can get my video back as well. Prove that I'm really here.
And we have some pre-written questions too for you. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, I'll go ahead and pop those up there for you.
Okay, there we go.
And sorry, it takes a second to get everything reorganized on my desktop here.
And I've just put the websites in the. I haven't given a great deal of detail on any of the products in this short time, but please do visit the website. For example, with APIGUARD, we've got a frequently asked questions download sheet, which there's a huge amount of information in there I find useful. Alternatively, if you're not sleeping well, you might find the perfect material to sleep.
I always said that for the Honeybee Health Coalition Guide for Varroa Management. It's great for unwanted guests. So, are you seeing the questions there?
I am. Yeah, would you like me to thread into them?
Okay. Yeah, if you want to answer those, that'd be great. And so these were questions that were sent ahead of time. Some of them I've condensed a little bit, but they were provided by beekeepers here in Maryland, and actually some of them were from elsewhere. So I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the question. So unused strips, good for if the package has been open. Start with APIGUARD. So with the tray presentation and the sachet presentation, you're going to be using that in one application. So that's not relevant for the tub, the 3 kilogram tub. It's that's good until the end of life. So the 3-year period from date of manufacture, as long as it's stored in needs to be below struggling Celsius and Fahrenheit. I think below about 90 degrees. Don't let it get too hot. Give it a good stir. The really important is to give it a good stir before you're first opening it, or whether you're opening it again a year later, for example. Really important to give it a good stir. Make sure that it's homogeneous, that it looks the same as it did when you first opened it. If you're seeing a lot of separation from a sort of oily and then a white layer, then probably best not to use it if it's not going to stir in. If it's separated and it won't stir back together, then don't use it. But in general, with APIGUARD in the tub, yeah, it's good until its expiry date. And the same with Apistan. Apistan, a volatile strip. So you've opened the pack, as long as you reclose it, leave it in the original packaging, ideally in a coolish sort of place, but that's not essential. Then again, it's good until the expiry. I just repeat, read the label. That advice that I've given you, I believe, is valid in the US, but this product in so many countries, there are different regulations in different countries, but I'm fairly confident that that is the correct guidance for the US. Now that we've discovered that mice fatten not the blood and you've tested and researched, yes, yeah, it's, you know, obviously as soon as we heard this research from fantastic work by Sammy, we were looking at ways that we could use that to improve control. You know, we are very much an R&D focused company. We spend over on R&D than any company I've ever spoken to, actually, not just in our industry, but in any industry. We put back into our either directly ourselves, but most working with researchers and institutes around the world. And I would say, if this is something that you do and you're looking for a partner, commercial partner, please do get in touch to hear from you. So there absolutely is research going on into new knowledge to improve our control. Honestly, I don't think I can really say much more than that, other than yes, it's on.
That's great to hear that it's in the pipeline, hopefully, at least, or possibly.
I hope so. You know, we've worked on so many or development project went nowhere, and it's frustrating of the game. For example, we worked on HopGuard for 7 years. We worked with manufacturers in tech, and we were looking at getting the product approved in the EU and UK. And 7 years we worked on building it, because the European regulators have very different standards to the US regulators. We consider it a medicine rather than a pesticide. It's assessed very differently. Eventually it came to the point where the regulators in Europe were just not going to accept our point of view, and sadly we had to discontinue it. So, you know, this product which is I know used, I don't know how widely, but used in the US, you know, we couldn't get that approved in Europe. So yeah, it's frustrating, but it's hopefully we'll get there with something, perhaps based on that research.
We actually had Fabiana on a couple weeks ago to discuss that product. So
they're doing some great research. I think they've brought out a new one recently, haven't they? Mm-hmm.
HopGuard 3.
Yeah, so I'd love to get it over here, but unfortunately not going to happen. I've been skimming these two questions. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to sort of claim a little ignorant here and apologize. I'm a sort of commercial guy rather than a technical guy. I'll answer what I can, but I want to give an incorrect answer. So, have we studied logistic effects combined with fungicides and other chemicals? Not us. No, we haven't. There has been research done with varying results. Similarly, the impact on queen and drone fertility. Not aware that we've done that work ourselves, but there is sort of work area. What I would say is that Apistan been sold around the world for more than 30 years, APIGUARD coming up for 25 years, and we've never had any report of synergistic effects or of negative impact on queen and drone fertility and longevity. So it's not to say that it doesn't happen, but just to say, and also to be clear, I'm not seeing any research that proves that it doesn't, but I'm not aware of sort of any reports that it does. I'm afraid that's the only answer I can give for those questions.
No, but
again,
the honest one's a great answer.
Drop me an email. But yeah, feel free, the people that ask those questions, drop me an email, and I'll put you in touch with our technical director, Paolo Mielgo, who and Hopkins as well, who developed APIGUARD, and they'll be able to tell you in much more detail than I can.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll probably follow up with that, and then we can post it on our social media for for all the beekeepers to read. That's okay.
Please do.
And then I think we have one more slide of questions. So one of the big things over here in the States is that people use different type of boxes. Obviously the medium boxes or the deep boxes, and they'll use different configurations, 4 and 8 or 8 and 10 frame. And so there's a lot of ambiguity in the labeling about what the dosage is for the odd configurations, double deep or 8 frame, mediums, that type of thing. And so if you wouldn't mind just going into a little bit about the dosage for especially Apistan and APIGUARD, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel like I am sure at all, because it's another one where I'm afraid I'm just not familiar with US beekeeping to know what exactly an 8 frame or medium is with both products, APIGUARD and Apistan. The advice, apart from just repeating that, follow the label. The advice is a dose, so a strip of Apistan or a 50-gram dose of Apistan per 5 frames. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And that seems to be fairly...
It's per 5 frames, and it's a dose at sort of 10 frames of APIGUARD. So 50 grams per 10 frames, 2 strips per 10 frames, or 1 strip per 5. Then it's just a matter of kind of looking at, well, what's this similar to? If your 8 frame medium is roughly the same number of bees as a 10 frame Langstroth, then you're going to use 2 strips of Apistan and two doses of 50 grams of Apistan.
Okay. And the next question, it's a fairly specific one, but this came in from one of our beekeepers here locally. When using APIGUARD after the honey flow during population decline, can you feed the bees? Is there advantage or disadvantage to doing that? And the question was referring to both pollen supplements, protein supplements, and sugar supplements as well.
Thank you so much for this question, because it's one that I think I can answer. Yeah, the previous advice that we used to give was don't feed and treat with APIGUARD at the same time. And the reason was we were worried that the feed would disturb bees from the APIGUARD, stop them. As I discussed earlier, one of the major actions is that the bees are cleaning it out from the colony, and then they're leaving a trail of it through the hive, through the frames, and that's how it's getting in contact with the mites. Want them to be distracted by the feed and not do that work. More recently, we've looked at it. We've actually got some evidence that, in fact, particularly with fondant or a protein patty, if you put it near to the APIGUARD on top of those, then it actually has a beneficial effect, because it's drawing the bees up. And more than the repellent effect of APIGUARD, there's the attractive effect of the feed. And when I say repellent effect, it doesn't repel the bees away from it. They want it out of their colony, so they can't. But they're also attracted up by the feed. Especially after weeks of being there, the gel may not be so anymore. So charging them up is they then notice that this foreign substance is there, and they clean it out and improve the effect. So we would say that if you're going to feed, do it with a fondant or a patty close to the apple, and then that will possibly improve the efficacy.
It's interesting. That's something I would have kind of been counterintuitive there, I guess. And so the submitter of the question did note that in the Honeybee Health Coalition guide, there's a suggestion for APIGUARD for not to feed, but I think that you may have answered that it may have been an older suggestion that just hasn't been removed yet from the guide.
Yeah, I mean, it's a correct difference if you don't feed. We're not recommending feed to increase the efficacy. But it was a question that we got a lot, and we used to say, no, you should wait before you feed until after the treatment's finished, which caused a bit of a timing issue for some beekeepers who wanted to get the supers off, treat with APIGUARD, and get the feed on at the same time. And so we did a bit more research into it, and we found that if you need to do that, actually it may work for you to do that than to wait until after the treatment's finished.
Okay, good to know. Let me see here. Okay, well, I think that it wraps up the questions on the pre-submitted questions, and so now we can open it up again to the chat if anybody has any questions there. I know there was one, and about as far as putting the spacer in if you're putting the APIGUARD in between two boxes. And I think you've covered that already, but it's important to have a spacer in there to allow the bees to have access to that area. Obviously, you're doing this hopefully after the honey flow, so you're not really worried about burr comb as much. But if that becomes an issue, is it okay to remove the spacer, or is it best just to deal with the burr comb, but to allow them to have access to that tray with the spacer on?
Yeah, so it's best to have that space. I mean, it only needs a bee space above the gel. We've got evidence that a bigger space does allow the vapor to well, it allows the gel to evaporate better and the vapor to serve better. So it's often the case that a bigger space up to a sort of super size will slightly increase the effectiveness of the treatment. It is important to leave that space there. It's another that you touched, sort of when you're running two boxes, where do we put it? Because I must admit, I speak from a European or English-centric point of view. We don't generally run double broods, so it's very simple for us. We just put it on top of the brood. Then the general advice is to put it in between them. You want the gel to be as close to the main cluster as possible. If the main brood is in the top brood box, then put it on top of that one. But put a split between the two, then put it in between. But as you rightly said, Mark, make sure there's that gap so that the bees can get into it and get.
Yeah, especially if it's a fumigant, it makes sense to have the ability for airflow around it. That way the bees are moving both the air through the colony like they normally do, but then that actually picks up the fumigant as well, in addition to walking through it and all that. So yes, that does. Yeah, so in between the boxes is the best. You can see the question there in the chat from the beekeeper.
Depending on where the main bee brood cluster is, but generally in between the boxes is going to be the most appropriate.
And I have to say, I really appreciate the upgrade to the syringe from the old scoop in the APIGUARD. I've done thousands of colonies with the old scoop, and that makes for a long day. So
it's a bit more accurate, it's a bit more easy to use, and it's label permits allow you to adjust the dosage. So, for example, I do that the label specifies in the UK that if you've got a nuke 5 frames, then you use the half dose, so 25 grams, which then allows you to just measure that out very simply.
Good. Okay. Well, we'll give you guys just one more minute if you want to have any questions. But Seb, if you have any parting thoughts for us, be a good time for that.
No, I noticed one question: can we buy these products? I mean, it's the usual retailers. So obviously, Dayland, Man Lake, and then on your local retailer. If they don't have our products, then ask them why not. The feeds, we're just launching. That's where I wanted to talk about nutrition, because I think it's hugely important. I did mention our feeds, but actually we're not really selling them in the US. We're not selling them very hard. Your Man Lake and Dayton produce good feeds, and they can do it much more cheaply than we can. So where price important, there's no way we can compete. So that was a bit of a waste of my time. I hope it was perhaps a thing or useful to you. If you want to get hold of our feeds, there's a guy in Florida who's got the VitaFeed Power, looking to VitaFeed Nutri and VitaFeed Patty into the country as we can, just on a small scale. If you'd like to try it, get in touch with me, and I'll in touch with our retailers for those products. And again, ask your local retailer why they're not stocking them. Fantastic feeds, and as I sort of indicated, you will make your money back on them. So it's worth spending a little bit more on them, because you know you're going to get healthier colonies.
Yeah, and I think feed, that's definitely an area that, you know, there's been a lot of research going into it. There's still a lot of research to be done, I think, especially with the micronutrients and then the gut flora and biota and everything. So it's, you know, it's definitely an area that I think we've underlooked a little bit, given the priority with varroa mites. But as you were saying before, with the integrated pest management approach to keeping hives healthy, you know, hamburgers are great, sodas are great, but you can't eat those every day. So
yeah, absolutely.
Keeping it as part of a multifactorial way of keeping your bees is the best way to go.
Yeah, there are two drums that we really bang as a company, two things that we feel are really important in beekeeping. One is good nutrition, and it doesn't necessarily mean feeding your bees, but it means making sure that you feed them when you need, and you feed them the right stuff. And the other drum that we bang, you touched on as well just now, is integrated pest management and the vital important rotating products. Thymol-based products, you're kind of more forgiving, and you can repeat use of those. But if you're using as year on year or an year on year, then you are opening yourself to huge problems, and not just yourself, but of course all the beekeepers around you as well. So we can't recommend strongly enough. And if that means you don't use our product one year, you use a competitive product, that's great, because by not using our product, you're helping extend its lifespan and its effectiveness. And there aren't that many products out there. We're always working on new, there aren't that many out there. So let's try to be useful as long as we possibly can by switching up and using different products. And again, as you said, Mark, use registered products, because there's a huge cost and a huge amount of time involved in getting them on the market. And there's a reason for that. It's because we've gone through a process of proving to a huge degree that they're safe for the environment, they're safe for bees, they're safe for beekeepers, they're safe for people consuming hive products, and that they work. And really, you might save money in the short term by using unregistered products. But it's opening yourself up to problems, whether that's resistance or residues or whatever it might be. Please register products, but don't use the same one all the time.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've done a lot of testing over the years on different products coming to market, and you know, there's a reason we do this. There's a reason we take the time to go through, make sure the products are safe for not only bees but for us. And so, you know, we can't say that enough. I will give a plug to the Honeybee Health Coalition on their guide for varroa management. If you have questions about products, anything that Seb's talked about, or any of the other labeled products, both here and in Canada, they have the guide that's available for free to download. They also have the online tool that allows you to go through, put in your hive condition during each phase of the year, and it spits out a list of approved treatments that can be used in the colony at that time. And then actually, if you click on that treatment that you want, it takes you to the application page. So very useful, very, you know, intuitive, and very easy to use. And the best price of all, it's free. So I highly recommend using that. So Seb, I want to thank you so much for staying up late. I don't think I captured this beginning, but you're actually calling us from England right now. So you're a few hours ahead of us. So it's late at night. So we really appreciate it. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to direct them over to Seb, or you can email me at bsquad@umd.edu, and I'm happy to take those questions for you. We will have this webinar posted online probably in the next 24 to 48 hours, just depending on how long the video takes to process. And don't forget to sign up for next month. It's actually on the 11th, so 30 days from now. We're going to have, well, less than 30 days because we're in February. But we're going to have not APIARY products from Canada come in and talk about their line of products. So once again, thank you so much for coming on, and I really, really enjoyed the presentation.
Thanks very much for having me, and thank you everyone for your questions as well. It was great.
We got a lot of thank yous in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down the room, but everybody have a great night and enjoy the last few weeks of winter before we get into the hardcore spring I think we're going to have. So thank you guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Seb. I appreciate it.